The dining hall of the Klein estate was not built for warmth. It was built for echoes. Every surface gleamed with polish, from the black marble floor to the chandelier dripping with glass above, and the room seemed to hum with the voices of those who thought themselves permanent. I had not set foot in it for over a decade, but as I stood in the doorway that night, nothing felt changed. My boots left faint marks on the polished wood, and the sound of them, dull, steady, was the only rhythm not planned by the orchestra of cutlery and crystal. Every seat was taken. My father sat at the head of the table, exactly where he had always sat, and his glass of wine caught the light like blood. He was older, but not softer. He looked up, eyes locking on me as though my presence had cracked the perfection of his evening. A slow smirk formed, and when he finally spoke, the air around the table tightened. "Surprised you showed up, Charlie," he said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "I did not think failures liked cake." The laughter that followed was scattered, hesitant, as though even the people laughing understood how sharp the words were. I felt them settle beneath my ribs like shrapnel, but I kept my face still. The habit of silence under fire was one thing the army had burned into me. My lips curved into the smallest smile. "Cake's free, right?" I asked, my voice lighter than I felt. He lowered his gaze back into his glass as though I had not spoken. There was no place card with my name. No chair pulled back in welcome. So I walked to the far end, near the swinging doors of the kitchen, where the smell of garlic and steam spilled into the room. I sat there, uninvited, the same way I had once sat at the children's table, placed far enough away that no one had to acknowledge me. The faces at the table turned back toward each other. Conversations resumed, forks moved again, and I let the noise wash over me like surf breaking against stone. The last time I had seen my father, I was 19. I had been standing in the same hallway, wearing fatigues and carrying a duffel. He had not hugged me, not even touched my arm. He had simply handed me a folded napkin with a grocery list written on it, his last words as I left: "The army won't make you a leader, Charlie." Just another forgotten name in a file. I had folded that napkin and tucked it into my boot. I had carried it through barracks and deserts, through nights when gunfire shredded the horizon. I had believed then that his words might be the last I would ever have of him. I was wrong. The chair beside me scraped, and Alexander slid into it with the ease of someone who never had to fight for space. My younger brother. Tailored navy suit, hair slicked back, gold watch flashing under the lights. He did not look at me as he poured himself wine, his tone casual, like he was making a joke only he found funny. "Glad you found the time," he said, "now that you are finished with logistics." The way he said the word made it sound like dirt. I smiled without showing teeth. "Still scheduling things like funerals." For a fraction of a second, his hand faltered, his eyes flicking up to mine. Then he gave a tight laugh, turned to the cousin on his left, and started talking as though I no longer existed. His body angled away from me, shoulders squared toward his new audience. That was Alexander's gift. He knew how to erase a person with posture alone. My father rose. He did not need to bang a glass for silence. The room always bent toward him. He lifted his glass high, and the light from the chandelier fractured across the crimson inside. "To family," he declared. "To resilience. To those who stayed when things grew hard and carried the name forward." His hand came down on Alexander's shoulder with the weight of a benediction. "To Alexander Klein, the man this family can count on." The applause was immediate. Glasses clinked, forks rang against porcelain, and my stepmother dabbed at her eyes as if she had just watched a miracle. Not a single glance in my direction. Not a single acknowledgement that I had bled for the very soil they lived on. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, fingers tearing a napkin edge until it frayed. Inside me, memories rose like sandstorms: the heat of Fallujah, the stench of diesel fires, the sound of civilians crying in a language I barely understood. None of those memories had broken me. But here, in this room, the deliberate erasure pressed harder than any battlefield had. The servers brought dessert, an almond tart twisted into the shape of a rose. My father leaned toward me then, voice lower, sharpened for my ears alone. "You should not have come back," he said. "You were a mistake we tried to forget. Do not make us remember you again." The words landed heavy, but they did not break me. Not anymore. Something inside me shifted instead, not crumbling but hardening, as though a blade had turned in the wound and come out steel. My phone vibrated against the wood of the table. The screen showed a restricted number. I swiped to answer while holding my father's gaze. The voice on the line was calm, clipped. "Commander Klein, we reviewed the file. You are not forgot. We need to meet." The fork slipped from my fingers, hitting the plate with a sound sharper than gunfire. The table ignored me, laughter rising around another one of Alexander's stories. They thought the night was ordinary. They did not know that the war I thought I had left had just walked back into the room with me. The night outside the estate carried a chill I did not expect. The garden lights glowed faintly along the gravel path, illuminating roses trimmed into perfect obedience. Their perfume lingered in the air, sweet and sharp, but it did not hide the weight pressing against my chest. I walked slowly, boots crunching over the stones, the echo following me as if the house itself refused to let me leave unnoticed. The laughter from the dining hall still drifted through the tall windows behind me, muffled now, distant, as though it belonged to another lifetime. Maybe it did. I paused by the fountain, staring at the water spilling in careful arcs, and remembered another sound entirely. The roar of desert wind across broken walls, the snap of gunfire carried on hot air. Fallujah. I had not spoken the word aloud in years. I had buried it under silence just as my family had buried me. But the memories were alive, and standing here, in the shadows of manicured hedges and marble statues, they rose uninvited. Travis's voice was the clearest. Calm even when chaos surrounded us. He had been older than me, wiser, a man who carried command in the tilt of his shoulders. When the convoy was ambushed, it was Travis who made the call that saved civilians huddled in a corridor. A call that cost him his life. I remembered the spray of dust, the sound of metal tearing, and his last words, shouted over the comms, "Move, Charlie, get them out." I had carried that voice inside me every day since. And yet, when the reports were filed, his name was reduced to a line of numbers. And mine, the officer who stood by him, who refused to rewrite the truth, had been marked unstable. A liability. The memory of that branded word still stung worse than any scar. I pushed the thought away and kept walking toward the gates. The estate stretched behind me like a fortress of lies, every stone polished to perfection, every wall hiding rot. I told myself I would never step inside it again. The iron gates loomed at the end of the drive, tall and spiked like the teeth of some ancient creature. Beyond them, the road was empty, lined with bare trees that bent like watchmen in the wind. I quickened my pace, my hand brushing against the phone in my pocket. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Wyndham Park, South Entrance. The words repeated in my mind like orders I had once been trained to follow. But then I saw it. A black SUV sat across the road, engine idling, windows tinted so dark they swallowed the night. The headlights were off, but a faint glow from the dashboard betrayed life inside. I slowed, instinct pulling me back into the rhythm I had learned in uniform. Assess, observe, do not react. The vehicle did not move. For a moment I considered walking straight to it, knocking on the glass, demanding answers. But something in my gut stopped me. Training, survival. I kept my gaze forward, my pace steady, and walked past as if I had not noticed. The cold air burned my lungs, but my pulse remained measured. Once I turned the corner, I let out a slow breath. Whoever was inside that SUV had been watching me, waiting. And whether they were tied to the voice on the phone or to the family I had just left behind, I could not yet tell. I found the motel I had checked into earlier, a nondescript building with peeling paint and buzzing lights, the kind of place where no one asked questions and silence was a currency. The room smelled of stale coffee and dust, but it was mine. I locked the door, double-checked the window, and sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand. I stared at the blank call record again, thumb hovering over the screen. Restricted number, no trace. Whoever they were, they had access to my file. They knew details only the military should know, and they wanted to meet. I set the phone down and leaned back against the headboard. The ceiling above me was cracked, the paint peeling in thin lines like veins. The silence pressed in, heavy but familiar. It was not the silence of home, nor the silence of safety. It was the silence of waiting, the same silence that filled the air before a firefight. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., I closed my eyes, forcing my body to relax, though my mind would not. I thought again of my father's words, of Alexander's laugh, of my mother's face the last time I saw her. And beneath it all, the voice on the line whispering through the static, "Commander Klein, you are not forgotten." I held onto those words as sleep crept closer, not trusting them, but not willing to let them go. For the first time in years, I felt the faint stir of something I had thought buried forever. Not hope, not yet, fire, and tomorrow it would burn. The morning broke pale and restless. I left the motel before most of the town had stirred, my jacket zipped high, the air thick with dew. Sleep had not visited me. The night had been a carousel of memories, my father's voice cutting me down, Alexander's smirk, the photographs on the walls, and that low, calm voice on the phone that called me Commander Klein. I told myself the park meeting could wait. First, I needed to confirm how far the lie had spread. The library was closer, and lies were easier to measure when written down. The Klein Family Community Library. The name alone soured my mouth. My mother had once called it Windham Hill. She had loved its shelves of dusty paperbacks and crooked lamps. Now the entryway was polished, sterilized, plastered with my brother's face in donor photos. Alexander shaking hands. Alexander cutting ribbons. Alexander in a press suit, his watch gleaming like a medal. I forced myself inside. At the counter stood a young woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Lee. She smiled with the brittle energy of someone trained to. "Good morning. Can I help you?" "I'd like to see the Veterans Archive." "Of course, we digitized everything recently. Follow me." Her voice was bright, but her shoulders sagged under the weight of duty. She led me down a hallway lined with photographs. Alexander again, holding folded flags, placing his hand on shoulders, playing the part of a man who had never heard a bullet sing. The archive room was small, lined with 3 glowing terminals. She gestured to one. "You can search by name, unit, or year." I typed mine. "Charlie Klein, nothing." I typed again, slower. "Full name, variations, dates of service." The screen blinked politely, no direct matches found. Lee frowned. "That's strange, maybe let me check something." She slid into the seat and tapped at hidden menus, her brow furrowed. "This says Army Reserve, administrative leave, non-combatant." She glanced up. "That's all it shows." My pulse stayed even, but heat rose in my chest. "That's not right." She bit her lip, scrolled further. A faint watermark shimmered in the corner of the page. She almost missed it. "This isn't standard." She leaned closer. "Klein Group Public Affairs, revision 7 months ago." Her eyes flicked to me, confusion giving way to realization. "Your family," she whispered. "You're not with Mr. Alexander, are you?" "I'm Charlie," I said. My voice sounded like steel I hadn't meant to sharpen. Lee paled. Her fingers curled away from the keys as if the terminal itself burned. I mean, they told us not to." She stopped, then lowered her voice. "There were property documents last year. Your mother's name was on them, but the signature, it looked copied. I didn't say this. Please don't tell them I helped." I nodded. "You've done enough." On the way out, I passed a framed photograph of Alexander in uniform. My uniform. The medals glittered brighter than reality ever allowed. My hand twitched at my side. I wanted to tear it down. Instead, I walked past, silent. Outside, the square was bright with ordinary life. Buses hissing, children laughing, dogs pulling leashes. The world spun happily on top of a wound. My phone buzzed, a new text. 10 minutes to 10. Wyndham Park, south entrance. Alone, I walked, not quickly, not slowly. My instincts measured shadows, reflections in windows, the rhythm of footsteps behind me. No SUV, no tails I could mark. Only the rising pulse of what I was about to learn. The park stood calm, trees brushing pale sky, benches wet with dew. A man walked his dog, a cyclist rattled past, then a voice at my shoulder. "You're early." I turned. A man in a simple jacket, eyes sharp, posture trained. He kept his hands where I could see them. "Mitch Darden," he said quietly. "Defense Oversight Division. We spoke on the phone." I waited. "I reviewed your file. It isn't gone. It's been partitioned. Flagged as unstable, restricted from public view." "Someone wanted you erased, but not destroyed. That's sloppier than they realized." He slid a slim envelope from his pocket, slow and careful. Inside is a memo. An investigator found irregularities tied to CRN logistics. He died in a car crash before he could testify. "CRN," I said. The taste of the name was metallic. "Your family signed deals through them. Land transfers, falsified donations. It's all here. And one more thing, there are whispers of a backup file. Travis Klein's personal redundancy. If it exists, you're the only one he'd have trusted with it." Travis. His name hit me harder than I let show. Darden's eyes stayed on mine. "You need evidence no one can dismiss. Find it. The window is narrow." Then he turned, walked away without looking back. I sat on the bench, envelope in hand, the sounds of children and dogs and leaves filling the air around me. I opened it. Inside lay photocopied pages. Contracts, signatures, property deeds, names of donors tied to money streams that bled into my family's empire. And at the bottom, a line written in the dry language of an investigator. Subject, Operation Herolite. Compromised reporting. Possible suppression of officer testimony, C. Klein. I closed the envelope and stood. The lie was bigger than family shame. It was national, and I was in the center. Tomorrow, they would know I was not forgotten. I carried the envelope back to the motel as if it were fragile glass. The morning had brightened, but the sky was washed pale, no color strong enough to hold. Cars moved lazily along the street. Ordinary life spun its web while I felt the world tilting under my feet. Inside the room, I locked the door, shut the curtains, and laid the envelope flat on the table. My hands stayed still for a moment, pressed against the paper as though steadying myself. Then I opened it again. The memo was written in the dry, detached style of government reports, but the words underneath carried heat. Operation Herolite. Contractor, CRN Logistics, irregularities in supply transfers, suppressed officer testimony. Subject, C. Klein. I traced my name with one finger, slowly, as if to prove it had not been erased here too. The report detailed dates and codes, transfers of equipment, numbers that at first looked meaningless but snapped into focus with memory. Crates that were supposed to hold medical kits weighed too heavy. Shipments listed as fuel arrived late, redirected. And always, at the end of each discrepancy, a signature from someone I had never met but who carried the same last name as people in the photographs at the library. The investigator's notes were clipped short, as though he had been writing quickly, as though he had run out of time. Recommend testimony from surviving officer. Risk, red listed for liability. I sat back. My silence had not been a choice at all. It had been written into a ledger, sealed with ink, and filed away where no one could see. I closed my eyes and memory uncoiled. The night sky above Fallujah had been a sheet of bruised violet broken by fire at the horizon. Travis had stood beside me, his rifle slung across his chest, his voice low. "If they want to bury this, they'll start with you," he had said. "You don't bend easy." I had laughed then, bitter and tired. "That's not a compliment." "It's survival," he answered. "And if I don't make it, you'll have to carry proof. Don't let them rewrite me." I opened my eyes. He had known. Somehow he had seen the shape of the knife before it fell. I unfolded another page. Property transfers, dates just after my mother's death. Her signature neat and strong, too strong. My chest tightened as I compared it in memory to the shaky letters she had written me from her hospital bed when the morphine dulled her hand. This signature bore no tremor. It was a copy pasted over grief. There were photographs attached too, not of my mother, of Alexander. He stood on a patch of earth I recognized instantly, though the caption called it something else: Klein Veterans Center, groundbreaking ceremony. My mother had grown daffodils in a star on that land every spring. She had called it her Hope Garden. Now it was a construction site. I pressed the page flat and felt something sharp inside me, an edge I had kept hidden. I turned to the last sheet. A brief notation, unofficial comms redundancy suspected. Designated, T. Klein, physical medium unaccounted for, Travis. The words steadied me more than they broke me. He had kept a backup outside the chain, trusting no one but the idea that someone would survive. If it existed, it was mine to find. And with it, every lie my family had built would collapse. I stood and paced the small room. My boots clicked against the thin carpet. I imagined Alexander's smug grin, the applause in the dining hall, the plaque on the library wall. I thought of my father's voice calling me a mistake. They believed they had cut me out completely. But they had left one thread unburned, and Travis's hand still gripped it. I packed the papers back into the envelope, slid it into the lining of my jacket, and checked my watch. It was only noon, but I felt the day stretching thin already. My father's estate was too far, and eyes would be watching. I could not move there yet, but I could start with the places Travis had touched, the corners of the city that still remembered his boots. I drove toward the east side, where the industrial park had long been half abandoned. Travis had once mentioned keeping things where no one would think to look. The safest place, he had told me, is one no one values anymore. The warehouses loomed gray and silent, broken windows catching shards of light. I parked near one with a faded sign still clinging to its wall, Eastwind Supply Depot. The gate sagged, unlocked. Inside, dust coated everything like snow. Old pallets leaned against the wall, plastic wrap brittle and curling. I walked slowly, boots crunching over glass, listening for sounds beyond my own. Nothing but pigeons in the rafters. I found a corner office with a door still intact. The desk inside was bare except for a metal drawer unit bolted to the floor. I crouched, tugged. Locked. I pulled a knife from my boot and worked the lock until it clicked. Inside, under a pile of rotting manuals, lay a box no larger than my hand. Steel, dented, with Travis's initials scratched into the lid. My throat tightened. I reached for it, fingers brushing cold metal. Then a sound, a car door slamming outside. I froze. Voices echoed faint through the broken windows. Male, confident. I moved to the shadows, box in hand, back pressed to the wall. "She was seen here this morning," one said. Library staff noticed her. Orders are to keep her under watch, no contact unless necessary. I held my breath until their footsteps faded. The car engine roared and rolled away. Only then did I open the box. Inside lay a single flash drive wrapped in cloth. On the cloth, written in Travis's scrawl, were 3 words, "For Charlie only." My hand shook as I closed the lid again. The war had followed me home, and I was done being silent. I left the warehouse with the steel box pressed tight against my chest. The flash drive inside was light, almost insultingly so, considering the weight it carried. My car sat silent under the shadow of a leaning lamppost. I checked the street twice before slipping behind the wheel. The black SUV was gone, but I could still feel its ghost in the rearview mirror. The drive back toward town was quiet except for the hum of tires on cracked asphalt. My fingers tapped the steering wheel in a rhythm I had learned from radio codes. I forced them still. Habit could betray you when someone knew what to look for. At the motel, I locked myself in again. Curtains drawn, phone switched off. The flash drive lay on the table like an unopened wound. I stared at it, remembering the last time I saw Travis alive. He had been smiling despite the fire. Always smiling, that stubborn line in his jaw that dared the world to break him. The convoy had split, half swallowed in smoke. We'd been pinned down by fire from rooftops, civilians trapped in the crossfire. I had shouted orders, pulled 2 men from a burning truck. And Travis had run back for a boy who had been hiding under the wreckage. He had carried him out. He had almost made it. The blast had thrown me against the wall. My ears had rung for hours. When I found what was left of him, the boy was safe. Travis was not. Now his handwriting stared at me from a piece of cloth wrapped around a flash drive. For Charlie only, I didn't plug it in yet. Some things you don't rush. Some things you need to carry like a lit match, knowing once you strike it, there's no way back. The knock at my door startled me into motion. 3 soft taps, then silence. I pulled my knife free and approached the door sideways. Another knock, quicker this time. "Charlie?" a woman's voice. Low, cautious, Grace. I opened the door a fraction. She stood there in a leather jacket, her hair shorter than I remembered, her eyes sharper. She looked older but not weaker. "You gonna let me in, or do we talk out here like old spies?" she asked. I let her in. She dropped a small bag onto the table and sat on the edge of the bed. "You look like hell." "You don't look like a librarian either," I said. She smirked. "I gave that up, too much silence. I'm better at digging holes." She nudged the bag toward me. "Speaking of, I've got something you need." Inside was a USB drive, plain, labeled with tape. H19 clean copy. I stared at it. "Where did you get this?" "Back door of a system that should have been locked tighter than a vault, but you know how it is. Someone always forgets a key." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "It's a fragment of the original after-action report, Operation Herolite, before they rewrote it." The word twisted in my chest. I set the steel box beside her bag. "Travis left this for me." Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me. "So he didn't trust the chain either." I nodded. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of memory filling the room. Grace was one of the few who had stood beside me in the desert. She had seen me bleed, and I had seen her hold the line when no one else could. Trust between us was not casual. It had been carved in sand and smoke. I plugged in her drive first. The laptop hummed, screen brightening with a series of files. Reports, field logs, timestamps. The words scrolled across, clinical and raw. I read them aloud. "Convoy compromised. Civilian presence confirmed. Officer C. Klein refused directive to mark site hostile. Officer T. Klein engaged in civilian extraction. Casualty sustained." My throat tightened. Travis's name stood there, unvarnished, not hidden under false codes. Grace leaned over. "Now compare it to the official record." I pulled up the public version she had also brought. The wording was different, almost surgical in its deceit. "Convoy compromised. Civilian threat designation approved. Officer C. Klein displayed hesitation. Officer T. Klein casualty due to delayed evacuation." Hesitation. They had taken my refusal to kill civilians and turned it into weakness. They had taken Travis's sacrifice and turned it into blame. My fists clenched so tight my nails cut skin. Grace watched me. They wanted a scapegoat. Someone had to carry the stain so the supply contracts kept flowing. You were the easiest to cut, too honest, too stubborn, too unwilling to play politics. I slid Travis's drive into the port next. For a second, nothing. Then a folder bloomed open, encrypted but with a password. I typed his birth date. Wrong, his service number. Wrong again. Then I tried something simpler. The day he died. The files unlocked. Dozens of recordings appeared, voice logs, photographs, receipts scanned into crude digital copies. I opened the first audio file. Travis's voice filled the room, rough but steady. "If you're hearing this, Charlie, it means I was right about one thing: we weren't fighting just an enemy out there. We were fighting the people pulling strings behind us. CRN was moving more than supplies. They were moving weapons under medical cover. And your name. Your name was flagged the minute you refused to sign the doctored report. I'm leaving this so you can prove it wasn't you. It was them. Don't let them bury you. The sound of his voice pulled me back across years. My chest ached. Grace exhaled slowly. He knew. I nodded. We spent hours combing through the files. There were manifests showing crates mislabeled, audio recordings of off-channel calls between contractors and officers I had never trusted, even photographs of serial numbers etched onto weapons that should never have been in civilian zones. And all of it connected back to CRN. All of it connected back to the Klein family name. I closed the laptop. The air felt heavy, pressing down like a storm. This isn't just family drama anymore, I said quietly. This is systemic. This is political. They erased me to protect a network that stretches further than this town. Grace's eyes were steady. Then you know what comes next. I looked down at Travis's flash drive, at his handwriting on the cloth. For Charlie only. The fire inside me was no longer quiet. Tomorrow I would burn their lies down. The air in the motel room had grown too heavy. Even with the curtains drawn tight and the door locked, I felt eyes pressing in. Grace must have felt it too because she stood and stretched, restless, her jacket creaking at the seams. We can't stay here, she said. If you've got Travis's files, someone else knows you've got them. And if they're willing to erase a decorated officer from history, they're willing to do worse. I slid the flash drive back into its cloth wrapping, careful, almost reverent, then tucked it inside my jacket. You think they'll come tonight? Grace's smile was humorless. They never wait long. And you've already made yourself visible. Library staff noticed you. That SUV at the gate wasn't lost. I sat back on the bed, elbows on my knees, staring at the floor. All those years I thought my silence was my choice. Turns out it was manufactured. Grace leaned against the wall, arms crossed. They had to pin it on someone. You were too stubborn to sign off on their report. That makes you dangerous. And Alexander was useful, I finished. She nodded. Pretty face, compliant, and willing to stand where they told him. They wrote him into your role because he wouldn't question the ink on the page. The anger rose in me like a tide. They rewrote my refusal to fire on civilians as hesitation. They made Travis's sacrifice a consequence of my weakness. And then they cut me out completely. Grace's eyes softened for the first time that day. We both know you didn't hesitate. You held the line. That's why I'm still here. That's why the boy Travis saved lived. I looked at her and saw not just an ally, but the weight of the truth we had carried alone for too long. We need to move, she said. I know a place. We left the motel through the back stairwell, the flash drive pressing against my ribs like a second heartbeat. Grace drove an old pickup that rattled at every turn but didn't draw attention. We wound through narrow streets, away from the main square, into the industrial district where abandoned factories stood like hollowed teeth. She pulled into the garage of a shuttered auto shop. The metal door clanged shut behind us, muffling the city. Inside, she spread out maps on a dusty workbench. CRN's contracts run through 3 channels: military supply, construction, and community initiatives. Your family name covers all 3. They don't just want you forgot. They want the Klein brand polished enough to sell. I traced a finger along one of the maps. And Operation Herolite? She tapped the margin. Herolite was the test. Move weapons under humanitarian cover. If anyone objects, erase them. If anyone dies, call it collateral. They buried it with you. The room tilted around me, the maps blurring into lines. I remembered the civilians' faces in that corridor, the fear, the desperation. My decision had saved them, but the price had been Travis and my name. They chose the wrong ghost, I said. Grace smiled grimly. Then let's haunt them. Before we could plan further, headlights swept briefly across the crack under the garage door. Both of us froze. The low growl of an engine idled outside. Grace pulled her pistol from under her jacket. I crouched by the side door, knife ready. The engine waited, lingering like a predator. Then, after a long moment, it rolled away. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. They're circling, Grace said. They already know we have something, I answered. She nodded at the box on the bench. So the question is, what do we do with it? I ran my thumb across the cloth with Travis's handwriting, for Charlie only. His voice echoed in my memory again, don't let them bury you. We don't run, I said. We go deeper. If CRN and my family forged deeds and rewrote reports, there will be more. Hidden accounts, letters, maybe even the original will. My mother knew something before she died. Grace's eyes flicked to mine. You're saying we go back to the estate? I nodded. If there's a place they thought was safe enough to hide the real documents, it's there. And if I'm already a ghost in the system, I've got nothing left to lose. She gave a short laugh, half admiration, half warning. Charlie Klein, you've always been good at walking into fire. Then let's burn the lies down. We packed quickly, sealing the maps and drives into separate bags. Grace loaded her pistol, slid an extra magazine into her pocket. I checked the knife at my boot and the small revolver I still kept from a tour overseas. Outside, the night had fallen hard. The street lamps flickered weakly, and in the distance I thought I saw the faint outline of that black SUV again. Watching, waiting, but this time I didn't turn away. This time I drove straight toward it. The estate rose in the night like a fortress. Its tall windows glowed faintly, yellow squares against the dark sky. Gravel crunched under the tires as Grace parked 2 streets away. We walked the rest on foot, hoods up, keeping to the shadows of the trees that lined the drive. Every step brought back echoes. Childhood footsteps chasing a ball across this lawn, my mother's laughter floating through open windows in spring, my father's voice, sharp as a blade, cutting through dinner conversations. This was the place that had raised me and erased me, all in the same breath. The gates were locked, iron teeth biting into the earth. Grace crouched, examining the panel. Standard electronic lock. Not much of a challenge. I looked up at the crest engraved into the iron, the Klein family sigil, polished so it gleamed even in moonlight. My stomach tightened. "Make it quick," I whispered. She smiled faintly, tools in hand, and within seconds the lock clicked. The gates groaned open just enough for us to slip inside. The path to the house was lined with roses cut too perfectly, as if someone had ordered them to bloom in formation. The smell was cloying, sweet enough to choke. I kept my hand near the knife in my boot, eyes scanning the windows. Grace glanced at me. "Which way?" "South wing," I answered. "That's where my mother kept her study." The back door opened with less resistance than I expected. We entered into silence broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of a grandfather clock. The air smelled of polish and money, but underneath lingered something sour, like a house pretending too hard to be clean. I led Grace through the corridor. The paintings on the walls followed us. Portraits of Kleins through the decades, men in uniforms, women in gowns, all painted as though greatness had been their birthright. My portrait had never been added. We reached the study. I paused at the threshold, my hand pressed flat against the wood. I had not stepped into this room since my mother's funeral. It smelled of her still. Old paper, lavender, and the faintest trace of ink. The desk stood polished, her chair pushed neatly under it. But I went not to the desk. I went to the cabinet behind it. Locked, Grace raised an eyebrow. "Again?" I nodded. "Again." The lock surrendered with a soft snap. Inside, stacks of folders filled the shelves, all neatly labeled. Property deeds, tax reports, philanthropy projects. I searched quickly, pushing papers aside until I saw it. A thick envelope with my mother's handwriting. Last will and testament of Evelyn Klein. My breath caught. I pulled it free, hands trembling. Grace leaned over my shoulder as I unfolded the first page. The document was clear. Every line of it bore my mother's signature. Every page named me as her rightful heir, not Alexander, not my father. Her estate, her holdings, her trust, all willed to me. I swallowed hard. At the back of the envelope was a smaller slip of paper, folded twice. A letter. "Charlie," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I know the men in this house. I know the weight of their silence and the way they twist words until truth itself bends. I could not protect you from them, but I could leave this. You are stronger than they know, stronger than even you believe. The truth will cut you, but you must carry it. I trust only you." The words blurred as my eyes burned. My mother had known. She had seen through the lies, had left me a weapon sharper than any blade, her faith. Grace touched my arm lightly. "She believed in you." I folded the letter back, slid it carefully into my jacket. "Then I won't let her down." We turned to leave, but a sound froze us in place. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossing the marble floor outside the study. Grace's hand went to her pistol. I drew my knife. The handle of the door began to turn. The handle turned slowly, and the door creaked open. Grace and I pressed into the shadows of the study, blades of moonlight cutting across the polished floor. Alexander stepped inside. He looked sharper than the photographs, perfect suit, cufflinks gleaming, hair slicked back with precision. Behind him came 2 men in dark jackets, shoulders too broad, movements too measured. Security. His eyes swept the room, then settled on me. For a second, he didn't speak. His lips curved into a smile I knew too well, the practiced one, the one that had earned him applause at dinners. "Well," he said softly, "the ghost returns." I kept my knife low, my body tense. "You should be careful, Alexander. Ghosts don't forgive." His smile widened. You never learned subtlety, always the soldier, always the martyr. Did you really think you could sneak into this house unnoticed? Grace shifted slightly, pistol angled at the floor. She didn't come for subtlety, she came for truth. Alexander's gaze flicked to Grace, dismissive, then back to me. You always did collect strays. I stepped forward. Mother left me everything. The estate, the holdings, the trust. I've seen the will. She named me, not you. His jaw tightened for the first time, but his voice stayed calm. That paper doesn't matter. No one will ever see it. What matters is the story. And the story says you hesitated, you failed, you disappeared, while I carried the family forward. You carried lies, I spat. You wore medals that weren't yours. You turned Travis's sacrifice into your platform. Something flickered in his eyes at Travis's name. For a moment, the mask cracked. Then he smoothed it again. You don't understand, Charlie. This isn't about you. It never was. The Klein name is bigger than either of us. Someone had to be cut away so the rest could shine. That was you. The words hit like a blade, but instead of cutting me down, they hardened me. Grace lifted her gun. We don't have time for speeches. Alexander raised a hand and his guards tensed. You won't leave here with anything, he said. I took a step closer, my voice low. I already have what I need. And when the world sees it, your story burns. For the first time, anger flashed openly across his face. He lunged forward, but I was already moving. Grace fired once not at him, but at the light above, plunging the room into darkness. Chaos erupted. The guards stumbled, shouting. I grabbed Grace's arm, pulling her toward the back hallway. We ran, shadows swallowing us, the echo of footsteps behind. Through the corridors we moved, past portraits glaring down, past locked doors and echoing halls. My childhood home twisted into a labyrinth of enemies. In the library, I stopped just long enough to grab a black case marked with the family seal. Heavy, too heavy for books. Finance records, maybe, evidence. Alarms began to ring, shrill and merciless. The estate woke like a beast disturbed. Go, Grace shouted. We burst through the side door, sprinted across the manicured lawn. A shout followed us, Alexander's voice raw with fury. You can't win this, Charlie. I didn't look back. We cleared the gate, slipped into the night, lungs burning, the case heavy in my hands. Only when we reached the truck did we stop. Grace slammed the door shut, started the engine. Tires screamed against gravel as we tore down the road. I pressed the black case against my chest, my mother's letter still folded in my jacket. My hands shook, not from fear, but from rage and clarity. Grace glanced at me. We got out. Barely. I nodded. He knows I won't stop now. The estate shrank in the rearview mirror, lights flashing like warning eyes. Alexander had declared war. And this time I wasn't coming back as a ghost. The case sat between us on the motel bed like an unexploded shell. Its black surface was scarred at the edges, heavy with the weight of secrets. Grace paced the room, restless, while I worked the latches. The lock snapped open with a metallic sigh. Inside lay stacks of ledgers, bound in leather, too elegant for simple bookkeeping. I pulled one free. The handwriting was careful, precise. Numbers flowed in neat columns with notations in the margins. Grace leaned over my shoulder. Those aren't donations. She was right. The columns were disguised as contributions to veteran programs, rehabilitation centers, scholarships. But the transfers looped back through offshore accounts, eventually landing in names I recognized from the photographs in the estate. Klein Group. CRN Logistics. And alongside them, initials I didn't expect. Government officials, military officers, even clergy. Grace whistled softly. This isn't just family business. This is infrastructure. They built a web. I turned the pages, my pulse climbing. The pattern was clear. Every donation was a mask, every mask tied to another mask, and in the center always the Klein name. A folded sheet slipped from between the pages. I opened it carefully. It was a list, typed, formal, with a header that chilled me. Strategic Partners, Hero-like Continuation. The names ran down the page like a roll call of corruption. Senators, generals, executives, men and women whose faces graced magazine covers and podiums. Grace muttered a curse. No wonder they erased you. You weren't just inconvenient, you were dangerous. Before I could answer, a knock sounded at the door. 3 measured raps, then silence. My chest tightened. Grace raised her pistol, nodding to me. I slid the case shut and crossed the room. Who is it? I asked, a voice came low. Darden? I opened the door cautiously. Mitch Darden stepped inside, his coat dusted with rain, his eyes sharper than before. He scanned the room once, then the case. You opened it, he said, not a question. Yes, I answered. He sighed, running a hand down his face. Then you've crossed the line. Grace bristled. She crossed it when they erased her name. This is just proof. Darden shook his head. Proof isn't enough. You don't understand the scale. Those names in there, half of them could shut down investigations before they start. The moment you push this, you'll be painted as a traitor, and the other half, they'll want you gone before you speak. I studied him. Then why are you here? Because I don't like watching soldiers get buried twice, he said simply. Grace stepped forward. So what's your plan? Hand this over to the same system that's already compromised? Darden's jaw clenched. There are still honest people left. But if you sit on this, you'll be hunted without allies. I looked at them both. Grace with her mistrust carved deep from scars she carried. Darden with his weary conviction, the kind that comes from years of fighting shadows. Two roads, both dangerous, both uncertain. My mother's letter burned in my pocket. I trust only you. I closed the case and lifted it into my lap. We make copies. One for you, Darden, one for us. If they bury yours, mine survives. If they come for me, at least someone else carries the fire. Darden studied me for a long moment, then nodded. You're more like her than I thought, Grace frowned. Or she's walking straight into the lion's mouth. I met her eyes. Sometimes you don't win by avoiding the lion. Sometimes you win by cutting the leash. Silence hung heavy after that. Outside, rain struck the windows in steady rhythm. Inside, the three of us sat with the weight of a nation's lies between us. When Darden left, I made sure he didn't see me slip a single flash drive from my pocket, already copied from Travis's files. The war wasn't just against Alexander anymore. It was against everyone who believed erasing me would erase the truth. The copy station hummed in the corner of the motel room, spitting out flash drives one by one. Grace stacked them carefully, each labeled in her sharp handwriting, A1, A2, A3. Insurance. I tucked two into my jacket, slid another beneath the baseboard behind the bed. If they find us, they won't find them all. Grace smirked. Paranoid suits you. It isn't paranoia if the SUV keeps circling, I muttered. She sobered at that. Fair point. On the table lay the list of strategic partners. My eyes caught one name in particular, Senator Hawthorne, a man once dragged through scandal for misusing veteran funds, yet somehow still standing, now tied to CRN's shadow web. I tapped the page. He's weak, too much dirt already buried. If I can shake him, the whole chain rattles. Grace raised a brow. Or he drags you down with him. Either way, it's a crack, and cracks spread. That night, we reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Daniel Reed, a journalist who had once investigated CRN before his column was mysteriously pulled. He answered my encrypted call with a dry laugh. Klein, the erased soldier, he said. I wondered when your ghost would knock. We met in the back of a diner long after midnight, the hum of the refrigerator covering our voices. Reed looked worn, hair grayer than I remembered, but his eyes still burned with restless fire. You have something? He asked. I slid one of the drives across the table. Proof, financial records, contracts, names. He glanced at it, then back at me. You know, every outlet worth a damn has already been bought. If I run this, it vanishes before it prints. Best case, I lose my job. Worst case, I vanish with it. Grace leaned forward. So what, you're scared? Reed shook his head. I'm realistic. If you want the truth out, you'll need smaller channels, underground networks, foreign ears, the kind they can't control so easily. I studied him. Then help me find them. For the first time, he smiled. That I can do. We didn't notice the SUV until we stepped out into the lot. Headlights flared, blinding. Grace shoved me down just as the first shot cracked the night. Glass shattered, tires screamed. She fired back, two sharp bursts, forcing the vehicle to swerve. I dragged Reed behind a dumpster, heart hammering, the flash drive burning cold in my pocket. The SUV roared forward, engine growling like a predator. Grace vaulted onto the hood of a nearby car, firing until the windshield spiderwebbed. The driver cursed, swerving hard, then sped away into the dark. Silence rushed back, broken only by Reed's shaking breath. You weren't exaggerating, he muttered. They really want you gone. I pulled him to his feet. Now you understand, this isn't a story, it's a war. Back in the truck, Grace drove us through back streets until the city lights thinned. My mother's letter lay folded against my heart. Travis's recordings waited on the drive. Alexander's face burned in my memory. I stared out into the night, voice steady. They thought erasing me would erase the truth, but I'm still here, and I'll make sure the world hears every word they tried to bury. Grace shot me a sidelong look. That sounds like a declaration. It is, I said, and as the road unspooled into the dark, I felt the weight shift. I was no longer running from their shadow. I was walking straight into it, armed with fire. The safe house was nothing more than an abandoned loft above a mechanic's shop. The walls were bare brick, the air thick with the smell of oil and rust. Grace paced while I sat at the battered desk, the flash drives spread before me like pieces of a broken mirror. We can't keep running circles, she said. Every hour we sit, they tighten the net. I know, I answered quietly. I thought of my mother's letter, of Travis's voice, of the boy he had carried out of the wreckage. Silence had buried too many already. If I kept quiet now, I would be digging my own grave. Grace stopped pacing, leaned on the desk. So we speak. It was not a question. I pulled the recorder closer, hands steady. Then we speak. The first words came rough, catching in my throat. I forced them forward. My name is Charlie Klein. You won't find it in your libraries, your archives, or your records. They erased it. But I lived. I fought. I watched men and women bleed beside me, and I carried the truth home. The truth they don't want you to hear. Grace's eyes never left me as I spoke. My voice grew stronger. They called Operation Hero Light a test. A mission, a mistake. But it was none of those things. It was a cover. CRN Logistics and the Klein family pushed weapons under humanitarian shipments. Civilians died because we were told to lie. I refused. For that, they cut my name from history. For that, my brother wears medals that are not his. For that, they called me a ghost. I paused, breath heavy. But I am not gone, and I am not alone. The proof is here, documents, recordings, my voice, Travis's voice. Every piece they tried to bury is rising now, and I will not stop until the world sees. Silence followed. Grace clicked off the recorder. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of a leaking pipe. She nodded once. That will burn. We encrypted the file, sent it through channels Reed had given us, small networks, independent veterans groups, encrypted forums where truth still had teeth. It was a gamble, but gambles were all we had left. By nightfall, the first responses began to echo back. Messages on the forums. Old soldiers leaving short, clipped comments. I knew it. Finally, someone says it. I served there too. Grace showed me her phone, her eyes fierce. It's spreading. The weight in my chest shifted. For years I had carried silence like armor. Now, for the first time, I felt air move through the cracks. Still, fear coiled close. For every voice rising in support, there would be those sharpening knives in the dark. I tried to sleep, but sleep did not come. I dreamed of footsteps in halls, of Alexander's smirk, of Travis's last words. At dawn, Grace shook me awake. Her face was pale but alive with something electric. Turn on the radio, she said. Static filled the loft until the station cleared. A clipped announcer's voice broke through. In breaking news, Senator Hawthorne has announced his immediate resignation, citing health reasons. The decision comes amid sudden scrutiny of financial ties to private contractors. Grace turned the volume down. Her lips curved in a grim smile. Your voice reached farther than you thought. I leaned back, the sunrise bleeding gold across the cracked window. My hands still trembled, but for the first time, they trembled with hope. By noon, the loft no longer felt safe. The air was heavy with the buzz of phones and the ping of encrypted messages flooding in. Grace sat cross-legged on the floor, scanning one screen after another. Veteran forums are lighting up, she said. Some are backing you, some are asking for proof. And, she hesitated. Some accounts look like plants. Bots trying to smear you. I joined her, scrolling through. The words jumped out, traitor, liar, fraud, then others, sharper, more personal. Klein abandoned her unit. Klein ran when others died. My stomach tightened. They're rewriting me again, in real time. Grace's jaw set. That means you've scared them. The first small outlets picked it up within hours. Independent journalists replayed my recording, added their commentary. The views ticked upward, steady, undeniable. Then came the blowback. A national news site posted a headline in bold. Disgraced soldier claims conspiracy, no records found. The article dragged my name through mud I'd already drowned in once. It quoted officials dismissing me as unstable, angry, bitter. They showed Alexander smiling on a podium, medals glittering, my ghost already fading behind him. I slammed the laptop shut. It's happening again. Grace's eyes were hard. Let them smear. The more they try, the more people will doubt the official line. We hold the real fire, they only have smoke. But inside, the fear gnawed. Was I just building another coffin of silence for myself? That evening, as rain lashed the windows, a message arrived on the encrypted channel. Short, unmarked, Charlie, you don't know me, but I served under T. Klein. I was there the night you refused to fire. You saved lives, don't stop now. I read it twice, then 3 times. My throat tightened. Grace leaned over my shoulder. See, you're not alone. I nodded slowly. The words anchored me, steadying against the tide of lies. By nightfall, the loft felt too small for what burned inside me. I stood at the window, watching headlights smear across the wet streets below. I can't stay in shadows anymore, I said. Grace looked up from her weapon check. What do you mean? They erased me because silence was easy. I broke that once. Now I break it louder. If they want to call me a traitor, let them. I'll stand where everyone can see and hold up the proof. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Then we go public, not whispers, not forums, a storm. The decision settled into my bones like steel. For the first time since they cut my name away, I felt the ground firm beneath my feet. This war was no longer private. It was public, and I was ready. The decision had been made. No more shadows, no more whispers in hidden rooms. Grace and I spent the night wiring together every drive, every document, every recording. When the sun rose, we would release it all uncut, unedited, undeniable. But dawn brought something else. The pounding on the loft door rattled the walls. A voice boomed through the wood. Federal agents, Charlie Cline, opened the door. Grace's eyes went wide. Already? I shoved the drives into my jacket. Too soon. The door crashed open before we could move. Armed men flooded in, weapons drawn, black uniforms gleaming with authority. At their front stood a figure I recognized. Mitch Darden. His face was grim, his voice low but firm. "You need to come with me, now." Grace raised her gun, but Darden snapped, not against me, against them. He jerked his chin at the agents, who spread into the room like a net. "What is this?" I demanded. "Officially," his eyes locked on mine, "you're under arrest for treason." The word hit like a bullet. Grace cursed under her breath. "But unofficially," Darden continued, voice sharp, "I'm the only reason you're still breathing." "They want you disappeared, Charlie. You've lit a fire too big. CRN's people have pushed a warrant through channels. If you don't move now, they'll bury you in a cell no one can find." Shouts erupted in the hallway. Gunfire cracked. Darden spun, firing back. "Move!" Grace dragged me toward the stairwell. We thundered down the steps, boots slamming against concrete, the shouts behind us growing louder. Outside, rain hammered the street, headlights flaring as black SUVs skidded into position. Darden fired again, glass shattering. "This way!" He led us into an alley, narrow and slick, where the stench of garbage clung heavy. A van screeched to a stop ahead. Darden yanked the door open. "In!" We piled inside as bullets sparked against the frame. The driver hit the gas, tires screaming, the city blurring past in streaks of light and rain. I pressed my back against the seat, breath ragged. "How far does this go?" Darden reloaded calmly. "Farther than you want to know. They're calling you a traitor, a foreign asset, a risk to national security. The smear campaign is in full swing. They'll use it to justify whatever happens to you." Grace's jaw tightened. "So the system's gone." "Not gone," Darden said. "Compromised, which means the only way through is outside the system. Make them expose themselves, force the truth into the open where they can't bury it." I clenched my fists around the flash drive in my pocket. "Then we take it to the world." Darden looked at me hard. "You understand what that means? No going back. You'll be hunted from every side. If you step into the light, you'll paint a target the size of a nation on your back." I met his gaze. "Then let them aim. I'm done hiding." The van roared out of the city, past warehouses and into the open highway. For the first time in years, the horizon stretched wide before me. But this time it wasn't escape I felt. It was resolve. Grace leaned forward, her voice low. "So what's the plan?" I opened my hand, showing them the drive marked with Travis's handwriting. "We put me on camera. Not a recording, not a leak. Live, national broadcast. They want a ghost? I'll give them a soldier they can't erase." The storm outside raged, lightning tearing across the sky. I had been silenced once, but the last stand had begun. The storm broke with dawn. Sheets of rain hammered the van as we pulled off the highway and into the shadow of the city. The skyline rose jagged, glinting through fog. Grace checked her weapon. Darden studied the map spread across his knees. "This is madness," he muttered, "but if you want the world to listen, this is the only way." I leaned forward. "The broadcast station?" He nodded. "Channel 7, live news feed at the top of the hour. If we can get you on air, even for 3 minutes, it will spread faster than they can contain." Grace smirked. 3 minutes is all she needs." The van screeched to a halt in an alley near the station. Security patrols circled the entrance. CRN's grip was visible in every dark SUV idling at the curb, every earpiece glinting in the rain. We moved fast. Grace led, silent and precise. Darden followed, his gun low but ready. I carried nothing but the drives and my mother's letter, heavy as any weapon. We slipped through a service door, weaving through corridors that smelled of dust and ozone. Shouts echoed somewhere above us. They knew. Time was already bleeding away. The control room loomed ahead, lit with 1,000 screens. Technicians spun at their desks, eyes wide as we burst in. Grace fired a shot into the ceiling. "Clear the feed," she barked. Darden shoved a stunned producer aside, pulling cables, rerouting lines. He looked at me. "Go, you're live in 10. I stepped into the studio. The lights blinded me for a heartbeat, hot and white. The cameras stared like unblinking eyes. My reflection wavered in the glass. For the first time the ghost had a stage, I drew a breath, and I spoke. My name is Charlie Cline. For years they told you I never existed. They erased my service, my sacrifice, my voice, but I am here, and I have proof. The screen behind me flickered alive. Documents, photographs, recordings. Travis's voice filled the air, steady, undeniable. My mother's will scrolled across the glass, her signature trembling but real. Ledgers lit with names, senators, generals, executives, each tied to CRN's shadow. They called Operation Hero-Light a mission. It was a crime. They armed conflicts, murdered civilians, and buried the truth under medals and speeches. They replaced me with my brother Alexander, a man who never carried the weight of the field but carried the lies gladly. They erased me so they could sell you a legacy polished in blood. The feed stuttered, flickered, then stabilized. Grace's voice came from off-camera. Hold steady. They can't cut it all. The studio doors slammed open. Alexander stormed in, guards flanking him, fury carving his face. Shut it down, he roared. I turned to face him. The cameras kept rolling. You can't erase me anymore, I said. He sneered. You think anyone will believe you? You're a traitor, a ghost. Voices rose in the control room. Technicians shaken. A cameraman stepped forward, refusing to cut the feed. And then, like a ripple, others followed. They were tired of silence too. Outside, through the glass, I saw movement, civilians, veterans, gathering as the broadcast echoed across the city. The first chants began, faint but growing. Charlie, Charlie, Charlie. Alexander's smirk faltered. For the first time, he looked small. Darden entered, weapon drawn, eyes locked on the guards. It's over, he said. The guards hesitated. And in that hesitation, the lie collapsed. I looked back to the camera, my voice clear. They tried to bury me. They tried to bury the truth, but the truth always rises. I am Charlie Cline. I was not forgotten, and neither will you be. The red light of the broadcast blinked steady. The world was listening. By nightfall, the web unraveled. Senators resigned. Generals faced inquiry. CRN's headquarters was raided, its directors vanished or arrested. Alexander's name became synonymous with fraud. My mother's will was read aloud on air, her words vindicating me. I stood in the square days later, Grace at my side, veterans gathered all around. The air was raw with chants and banners. For the first time, I felt the silence lift. I had been erased, but I had written myself back into history, not as a ghost, as a voice.